So there's a new report from Statistics Canada casting some doubt on the idea that Canada is facing a widespread labor shortage, and that's something we keep hearing over and over again, especially here in Quebec, right? So many jobs open, can't be filled, etc. Well, this new report suggests, you know what? Maybe the devil is in the details. Instead of just accepting that story as fact, take a look at what kinds of jobs employers are not having difficulty filling versus the ones that they are. Jim Stanford is an economist and director at the Center for Future Work. He's quoted in the story. Mr. Stanford, thanks for being with us this afternoon.
My pleasure, Aaron. Thank you.
Yeah, let me first of all get your reaction to that statement, right? That it's not the fact of simply saying there's a widespread labor shortage. We need to dive a little deeper.
Yeah, absolutely. We've heard a lot of complaints from business groups and employers over the last few years, particularly since the pandemic, but even before the pandemic, that they can't find enough staff, and therefore there's some kind of labor shortage. And then they usually have some policy prescriptions that come out of that, such as, delaying the retirement age, for example, or opening up to more temporary migrant workers coming from other countries. But in fact, when you look at the numbers, it's not clear at all that we're actually running out of workers in Canada. It seems to be maybe more a problem with the nature of the jobs that those employers can't fill.
All right, well, let's go through that then. What are those jobs? And then we'll get to immigration, because that's not the be-all and end-all for this, is it?
This new Statistics Canada report last week kind of dived into the overall job vacancy numbers and then divided it up according to the level of formal qualification that was required. What kind of skills and education do you need for the job that's being advertised? And it turns out that most of the jobs, about 2/3 of them, were for jobs that don't require anything more than high school. Another chunk of them was for jobs with some kind of technical certification, like a skilled trades or a college diploma. And only a very small number of those jobs required a university degree. So the idea that we don't have workers with the right skills certainly doesn't fit. Previously, we had also seen data showing what industries were advertising the most vacancies, what industries had the hardest time attracting staff. And again, it wasn't, scientific people or computer workers or finance specialists. It actually was people working in restaurants, fast food, accommodation, personal services, and retail. Those are the industries that advertise the most unfilled jobs. So again, it casts doubt on the idea that we somehow run out of Canadians, or Canadians have lost their work ethic, and this is why employers can't find staff. It suggests more. There's certain industries that can't break out of this kind of low-wage, high-turnover staffing model. Those are the places where vacancies are advertised all the time. And it doesn't mean that we're actually short of workers.
So it seems to me it paints a picture of people being unwilling to do those jobs because perhaps they have a higher level of education, or they feel they're too skilled for them.
Well, that's probably true. We all have seen taxi drivers who had a PhD, or somebody, slinging hash in a diner, who, has got some kind of specialized skill and work in that area. And the reality is, Natasha, we have an economy that requires people to do those things. We're never going to have an economy that doesn't require wait staff and delivery people and cleaners and drivers. So, first of all, we got to recognize that's part of how our economy works. Then the question is, do we continue with the tradition of just kind of devaluing that type of work and saying, you're just a truck driver, deserve a decent wage? Or do we say, even during the pandemic, we recognized these jobs were essential. We classified them as essential. We said they were heroes for continuing to do their job despite the risk of infection. Well, why don't we pay them a living wage? That might solve some of the problem that these firms are having recruiting and retaining labor.
Which kind of brings us back. If you go to the lowest end of the scale here, you're working at a fast food restaurant, McDonald's or whatever else. And the question you ask, Jim, in the article is simply, if this is the big problem, recruiting staff, if that's the big lie, if you will, why not just pay them a little more? And obviously the answer is, well, they don't want to have to pay them more because they don't need to pay them more.
It's funny, Aaron, if you study kind of conventional supply and demand theory in economics, when something's in short supply, you normally expect the price of it to rise.
Exactly.
And this is, kind of a economics 101 no-brainer. But we have not seen that happen where workers are concerned. So again, even though employers, particularly in those low-wage sectors, complain about labor shortages and want government to help them in different ways. They're not doing what seems obvious. Obvious step number one, pay them more. Obvious step number two, I think the hours of work are just as important as the wage. Part of the problem in those industries is people have very short shifts, part-time work, irregular shifts. You never know when you're going to work. So if you offered people regular full-time hours, I think you'd have more success and benefits and training and that kind of thing. Obvious step number three, if labor truly was scarce, employers should be figuring out how to replace labor with other inputs like robots and machinery and automation and artificial intelligence. And we've been obsessed for years with this idea that all these jobs are going to disappear because of robots. But in fact, Canadian businesses in particular have done a very poor job at trying to use automation to replace some of those tasks. There are bits and pieces of it. We see the automatic checkouts at the grocery stores and so on. But business could be doing a lot more to bring in technology as part of the solution here.
So robots over increasing immigration numbers.
Well, it's not an either-or thing. And Natasha, don't get me wrong. Immigration is really important to Canada. And we should do it right. You know, if people are going to come to Canada to work, then we should give them the full rights and the full treatment and
Absolutely.
the full protection as any other workers do. I just don't think that complaints from business about a labor shortage are the reason why we should set our immigration policy at any certain level. We should have a level of immigration that makes sense for our society and for a moral responsibility, given all the refugees in the world, and then support those people when they come. We should not view immigrants as an escape valve for employers who can't find enough people in Canada to do those unappealing minimum wage jobs.
Listen, I think most people would agree with that, but the reality is that seems to be, the rationale being used to bring these people in to fill that pretend gap in the labor force. But even when they come here, we're finding out they don't want to take those jobs either.
I'm not sure. I mean, there are people doing those jobs. It's high turnover, and many of those people from other countries, especially if they come on a temporary migrant program, these temporary programs that are really exploding, things like the temporary foreign workers or international students who now come more to get a job than to actually study at a university. Those programs are especially, I think, exploitive because the people have a very hard time changing employers. In many cases, your status in Canada depends on keeping that job. And this is one reason employers like those programs, whereas a permanent resident or a Canadian can quit and go and look for something better,
right,
which a lot of them are doing. So, I think immigration is very, very important to Canada, but I don't want to see immigration used as a safety valve or a subsidy almost for employers who aren't willing to lift the wages for the positions they're trying to fill.
So just as a final question, the government's aware of these numbers. The government's aware of the Stats Canada report. What do you think government position should be here with respect to addressing this?
Well, I think that government at all levels, including the Bank of Canada, which is, of course, the federal government's bank that sets interest rates, has to be a little bit more skeptical of all of these claims about a labor shortage. And right now, the Bank of Canada seems to have swallowed those claims, hocus bolus, and they're increasing interest rates to slow down the economy and explicitly say they want to get the unemployment rate up there because we've heard employers complain that there's a labor shortage. If that labor shortage isn't genuine, if that labor shortage is just rhetoric from employers who can't find people to do a minimum wage job, then we're holding the whole economy hostage. So I think we've got to be more critical and then think about ways that we can upgrade work, including in those essential services like grocery stores and food delivery and trucking and cleaning that we've taken for granted. Upgrade those jobs, make them decent work, give them tools and technology and machines to work with so they can do the job better. And I think that's a better way to go at it rather than accepting this theory that there just aren't enough willing Canadians to do minimum wage work anymore.
Interesting take.
And what really is essential. Great points. Thank you.
Mr. Stanford, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Very much appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Jim Stanford, economist and director at the Center for Future Work.
That's eye-opening.
Is it all just kind of an illusion, this idea that there's all these jobs open? By the way, there's a really interesting statistic in there that shows beyond the high school diploma, 113,000 job openings, 227,000 people who want them at that level.
Of the higher education.
Consider that.